In this lesson, we are going to learn about something called imperative routing. Now, we've already injected the router, however, we haven't actually used it in its raw form in plain JavaScript. So the issue with this is that we are here at /passenger1. However, there is no way when we go back to passengers to allow us to click through to view individual passengers. So what we're going to do is basically set up the imperative routing. So when we click on a new button called View Passenger, it will then take us to that passenger. And when we view that passenger, such as here, we're going to actually add a Go Back button. So let's jump across to the code and implement this functionality. So the first one and the easiest one that we'll do is open up the passenger viewer. Now, we already injected the router here, so we have the router available inside our component. All we're going to do is create a function inside of here called Go Back. Now, this doesn't need to take any arguments, but essentially all we're going to do, because we have this.router available, and you can see all of these different type of methods, is we want the one called navigate. So navigate simply takes an array, and all we need to do is pass in a string and say we want to go to passengers. So this is called imperative routing because we are using the native API rather than something like the router link, which we looked at in the previous videos. So by using router.navigate, we're telling the component class itself to actually use the router. Now, to implement this go back function, what we'll do is go into our template. Now, all we're going to do in here is just create a button with a click event, and we're just going to pass in go back, and we'll close this off, and we'll put the words inside go back. We'll add a nice little HTML icon, so we'll do and LSAQUO, and then close that off. And all this is just a simple arrow. So let's go back to the browser and check this out. So when we're on /1, we see this go back, we can click it, and we are now back at /passengers. Now, the interesting part in the next piece is because we are using the passenger detail, is we want to implement a particular button that when we click it, we actually want to view the passenger. And you might think at this point that you can use something like router link. Now, that might be a good decision. However, this is what we call a stateless component. So what we actually want to do is create a function here called go to passenger. And all we're going to do inside of here is just simply emit an event to the parent to tell it to visit that particular passenger. And all we're going to do is call this event view. So we'll go ahead and create another output here, and we'll call this one view. It's going to be of type event emitter. It's going to have a type of any, and we'll do new event emitter. So in the previous videos, when we were learning about event emitter, we learned about these types any and any and any. However, this was just to introduce you to the concept of event emitter, and hopefully you understood it by now. However, the types of events that we're actually emitting, if we look at the edit, remove, and the view. So let's have a look at edit. We are actually emitting this.detail. And if we look at remove, we're also emitting this.detail. So what we're in fact emitting are passenger objects. So we can change these type any's to passengers to say that we are actually emitting an event with the passenger. And we can also add the type of event that we're emitting here. So this is to finalize our application. We're going to have this view output, which when we click is going to call this function called go to passenger. So let's go ahead and implement this. We'll do it underneath here. So we'll do go to passenger. All we're going to do is do this.view.emit and this.detail. So we're going to simply emit this to the parent. The parent component, if you remember, is the passenger dashboard. So inside of here, we have our passenger detail component. So all we need to do is simply listen to this view event, and we're going to have a handle view, and that's going to give us our event object back. So inside this handle view function, we can go to our component. What we'll do is add it at the bottom here, and it's going to give us the event. Just like before, it's going to give us the passenger. So inside of here, what we're going to do is actually use the imperative routing, but we're going to use dynamic imperative routing. We're going to use the dynamic imperative routing to allow us to route to particular passengers based on their ID. So this event property is a passenger, and each passenger has an ID. So what we need to do for this is actually inject the router. So what we'll do inside our constructor is inject this router. So what we can do is private router, and that's going to be of type router. So Angular is going to look up this token. What we need to do is obviously import the router. So we'll go up to the top. We'll do import router, and then from @Angular, and you should know this by now, /router. So import the router from the Angular router. We're going to use it inside of here. So again, we're going to use this .router. So we can do this .router.navigate/passengers. Now, instead of passing something like a unique ID such as this, what we actually do is pass function arguments as parameters. So here we can say that the second argument is going to be the event.id, which each passenger, as we know by now, has a unique ID. So this is essentially going to do something like 1 or 2. So we'll save this out and go back to the browser. We'll check out our new view button. We'll check out our event that is being emitted and make sure everything is working correctly. So we'll go to our passengers. We will scroll down. We can click view. We are now viewing Steve as a passenger. We can go back. We can scroll back down. We can view rows. We can pull in the data for this. So our application is now working full circle. We can obviously edit the names from here as well. So we can rename Steve to Steven. We can click done. We can refresh the page. Everything is being persisted. We can view that passenger. We can change his name here as well. So we can change him back to Steve. We'll update that passenger. We'll give him a refresh. So everything is working as intended. So when we go back into the code, we have a working router, we have a working component. We're exporting all of our components, we're passing data in, we're emitting events out, and we're routing to the particular components. We've got some subscriptions in our services, we've got some different function calls, and we'll look at a few more routing features before the end of this course in the next video.